don't buy into you have to be up at 5 a.m. or you have to be up at 4 a.m. But when you're awake and when you're working, you have to be so addicted to what your passion is, and you have to be so obsessed to your business that those hours that you spend are more efficient than anything else you do.
Hello, why do they doubt the kid? I'm about to prove them all wrong again. I got a low tolerance, cause they don't even know what the problem is. It's me. You waiting on the boy to fail, then hold your breath and face your death. Cause you play a roulette with each step. I progress, no less. Go ahead and place your bets. Cause we know where we at, we know we top tier. Cause all the hate that you bring, we know it stops here. I'm taking off like a rocketeer and stopping here. It's strange how they cannot see the future, but see profit here. Wait up.
So Lee Yoder, man, welcome to the Maxed Out Podcast Studio. First time you've been here, man. How you doing?
I'm excited, man. This is an awesome studio. Been a long time since you and I have caught up, so I'm excited to be here. I told you I've been on a bunch of podcasts. I've never done one live like this in a studio. I've always wanted to. When I see podcasts like this, I think it's a way better way to do it. So I'm excited to be here.
So what you're telling me, Miles, that we've done a good job.
I don't know if I'm a good judge because this is the first one I've been in, but it looks good to me. I think it's awesome.
Well, good, man.
You guys done a great job.
Well, I'm excited to have you here. So we, we go back a few years.
Yeah.
And what some people might not know is like the first podcast I ever went on was actually the Threefold Real Estate Podcast with Mr. Lee Yoder.
Yeah.
Because at that time in my real estate investing career, I was doing well. I think I had a little over 100 units, but I was like the turtle, man. Like turtles stay in their shell, and that's where they feel safe at. And that's what I was doing in real estate investing. Is I was just kind of staying to myself, like the quiet assassin.
Yeah.
And your podcast that I went on, that was kind of the moment where I decided to start branching out and networking and meeting more people and realizing that, man, this thing's a lot easier through entrepreneurship and real estate when you have a network and when you know people.
Yeah.
So it's incredible. I put a post up today on Instagram and it was talking about like, we never know our impact on people.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. And the reason that I put that on there was because one of the guys that's worked for me for 6 or 7 years was kind of talking about a little bit how I changed his life. And we tend in entrepreneurship to not realize what we do on a day-to-day basis has huge impacts on others. And at that time back then, you were starting kind of your real estate journey. You'd already started, but you were getting ready to blow up just a little bit more. And your podcast that you were using, one was to kind of get your name out there a little bit and to network and get things going. But you probably didn't realize in that moment that you were impacting me too.
Yeah, I had no idea.
And after your show, I went on to film 50, 55 other podcasts with different people around the country. So I appreciate it. But let's talk about you, man, because you've not always been an entrepreneur.
No, right, yeah. I was just getting into it. When I interviewed, I might have still had a full-time job when I interviewed you. When I first started the podcast, I was still working full-time as a physical therapist.
You did, yeah. You were still doing physical therapy, and you're right in that moment. And it was cool because I had just met you around that time. Yeah. It was cool to see you drop the W-2 and go back to just being an entrepreneur, man.
Yeah.
And we're going to dive into that. But let's talk about some of the things that really drive you, and we'll introduce everybody to you and give them all the information about you. But one of the things that I've always admired about you, because I follow you on social media, I follow your stuff. I might not always like it or comment on it because we get busy, right?
Oh yeah.
But at the end of the day, family is such a huge part of your life and part of your entrepreneurship journey. So your wife and your kids, like, tell me about it, man.
Yeah, I'd love to. No, that's a huge part of my life. So much more important than all the other stuff. But yeah, 2 great kids, 11 and 9 now. Hard to believe, but I love my wife. Have a great relationship with her. We work together. She doesn't have a W-2 either, and she already didn't when I quit mine. So when I jumped, we were really jumping. No steady income. But we do a hybrid homeschool program. So our kids are home a lot. My wife, does most of that. So we're very integrated. We're with each other a lot. So you've probably seen some of the videos I've posted, some pictures, like we take our kids to the properties, we're cleaning up properties together, rehabbing units together. Of course, they've been young through this journey, so they haven't been that helpful. Sometimes they're out there just spilling paint on carpet that we weren't planning on replacing. But it's fun. It's kind of tough. It's complicated, but I wouldn't have it any other way. It's been fun to do it with the family.
Yeah, man, I love it. And I love the family stories because, my kids, of course, I have a senior in high school, a junior in high school. My daughters, they live in Canton, Ohio with their mom. They're 3.5 hours away. So So I don't get all that personal time with them, but I'll tell you, one of my daughters is like carefree, crazy soccer player. I mean, she'll go play D1 college soccer. You know, she's a junior right now. My other one also, like we were at a banquet dinner last night, and both of them got like all federal league, all district, all county,
cool.
like first team. Like they're just racked with the stuff. But my senior daughter, Addison, she is like, I'm done playing soccer, Dad. Like I just want to go to college. I want to start my career. I want to do all this. And of course, I'm the dad that says, if that's what you want to do, great. If you don't want to go to college, let's talk about that, right?
Yeah,
like, because I'm okay with either path.
Oh, yeah.
But Addison's always had like kind of that entrepreneurial spirit. And I mean, even here recently, we were trying some new videos on social media about like side hustles to fund your investments and your entrepreneurship.
Yep.
And I got a call from her because you don't always know, like, are my kids watching my stuff or do they just like it because it's like Dad?
Yeah.
And she's like, hey, Dad, do you have any ideas about, you know, like some online stuff I can do to start making some extra cash? And then a week later, I posted some stuff about, you know, crypto and stocks. And she's like, hey, Dad, like, you know, my friends want to know about like crypto and stock. And I'll tell you, like, I get more enjoyment out of those conversations with my family and my kids than like anything. Like any deal I've done, any amount of money I've made, like none of it compares to the family piece of it, man. Like it's just, it's incredible.
Yeah. It's good that they're seeing that, they're being exposed to that, because that's definitely part of my journey that, you know, I just thought you go to college. Like people that are successful go to college. People that aren't successful don't go to college. I mean, and not that my parents, I mean, I guess, I don't know. My dad really didn't go to college. He went like for a little bit and then dropped out, and he's in construction. So it's not like my parents were like uppity in that way, but you just, even in school, I think just teachers, it's like, you know, a lot of the good jobs require a college degree. That's what you think. And so I went to college. I was going to become a doctor. And I didn't know that I wanted to be a doctor that bad, but it was like, well, I think that's a good job. I think I can pull it off. I got good grades. So it's like, let's go to college. But I was never exposed to what I feel like now. I know like there's a whole nother world out there. And I think it's tough as a high schooler to have any idea what you want to do. But the more you're exposed to things and seeing that, I think that's great that you're doing that. And I hope I'm doing that for our kids. I'll do the same thing. I mean, just a tiny little example, but we're playing Life, the board game. And at the beginning, you can choose if you want to go to college or not. And every time I'm like, I'm not going to college, wasting money. You know, it's a bad investment just to, you know, get them thinking a little bit. Because I mean, if they want to go to college, I mean, gosh, if you want to get in healthcare, you kind of need to go to college. If you want to become a nurse, a doctor, yeah, college is necessary. There's, you know, you want to become a lawyer, you got to learn some things. So there's some paths, but there are a lot of great paths that don't require college. And I had to go to college for 7 years to become a physical therapist. I had to get my doctorate.
Man, a lot of people that have followed me for years, they kind of know my upbringing. They know I was, I grew up in a poor family. I mean, I had my mom and dad there, but I didn't have a great relationship with them. I didn't really like my dad. We grew up in poverty, and man, I got out and I went to police academy and became a police officer because that's what I thought I was supposed to do, was have a W-2 job.
Yeah. And
because I was an athlete, and I'm like, well, what do I want to do? Like go chase some bad guys, drive cars fast? Like that shit sounded fun.
Yeah.
But I got myself in debt. Like I never figured out how to use money and all that. And so for many years, I was like so angry at my parents, and I mean, very angry, right? Like, and even, and I went to a therapist for a long time over some other stuff, just because I needed somebody to help guide me through some parts of my life.
Yeah.
And I remember the moment when I was telling her about my family life and how mad I was at my parents because they didn't teach me about money. They didn't teach me about finances. They didn't teach me about entrepreneurship. Didn't teach me how to do a checkbook. And she, like with a straight face, said, "You sound very stupid today, Todd." I said, "Like you're supposed to support me. Like
I'm not paying you to tell me that."
You know? And she's like, "But let me explain to you what I mean." She goes, "How can you be mad and angry at your mom and dad for not teaching you that stuff when they never knew it themselves? Like you just told me your mom and dad filed bankruptcy. You told me that they, you know, switched job to job. Your mom only made it through 8th grade." She goes, "How can you be mad at those people?" She goes, "The only thing that you can really do now is be thankful that you've learned it on your own and to do your part to teach your kids and as many people as you can touch in this world about financial literacy and about all those things." And, you know, from the day that she told me that, like my mind, like just changed and I started acting differently. And that's when I really started like pushing social media a little bit. And I've never used social media to make money, but having people say, "Hey man, you inspired me this morning," or "Hey man, like I love your content," or whatever, like that was always the inspiration to put some things out there. So don't ever stop pushing, man. Like our kids, man, they're like sponges. They suck up everything that we do. Now, your wife, was she working a full-time job for a while before she became an entrepreneur?
Before we had kids, she's an RN, so she's a nurse. So she was full-time before we started having kids. But as soon as we started having kids, she went to PRN. just working, once every week or two.
So physical therapist, how long were you full time doing the physical therapy stuff?
Yeah, only for a couple years before I came on with a company in Cincinnati called ProLink. It's actually a healthcare staffing company. I came on as a physical therapist, but pretty quickly I kind of started climbing the corporate ladder, and I was doing no physical therapy. So I was managing a bunch of therapists out in the field, but it was a startup company at the time. It's like $1 billion company. They've done incredibly well. While I was there, so because it was a startup, like I was kind of building a division within the company, and I was, just doing operations stuff and sales, marketing, like very entrepreneurial. And that was my first taste of I loved it. I didn't miss physical therapy at all.
Right.
So 2 years in to, a 7-year degree, and I'm like, I love doing this. But I think again, because, I feel like maybe like God created me to more be entrepreneurial. At some point I was like, I feel like I want to do this for myself, not for somebody else. Like I'm building somebody else's company, but I just didn't know what that meant. And so, cause all I had was like, well, I'm supposed to be a physical therapist. Like I've already, ventured. So, I actually did go back to doing home health physical therapy, but already I knew, I think I want to get into real estate. I think I want to be an entrepreneur. I think I want to try something on the side. So that was kind of my evolution up to that point.
Yeah. And I think hearing you say that right there, and you and I have more in common than probably what we even know, right? And,
Yeah.
And like
sure.
you played high school football and you played college football, right? You were a safety at
small
college.
college. Yeah.
It doesn't
Division
matter.
3.
Don't screw up the story, Lee. You
Okay.
played college football.
Played
You're
college
a
football.
badass
There you
safety
go.
at college
Yep.
football, right?
Yep.
But I mean, through sports and stuff, you to get to college, you got to have that grind. You got to work harder than other guys because it's very competitive, right?
Yep.
And a lot of that carries on into our life. And sometimes we don't know how to harness that in the right way from an entrepreneurial spirit. And then hearing you talk about the corporate ladder, that was kind of what I did, right? Like I was in law enforcement, and then I went to the private side running internal investigations and organized retail crime for Macy's, a very large retail store.
Mm-hmm.
But probably how you felt and how I felt was like it was like I had my own little business there. But then at some point I'm like, it's great, but I'm not making the money that they're making, right? Yeah. So at some point, it sounds like you recognize that like, man, like this is great. I love the business feel. I love kind of being able to grow my own little business, even though you're working for somebody else.
Yeah.
But at some point you're like, I could do this. Like I could do this for myself, right? And that entrepreneurial kind of engine starts kicking on. And I think when we go back a little bit to what we was talking about earlier with college and things like that, even with my kids, I don't tell them that you either have to go to college or you don't have to go to college. I want them to make those decisions. But one of the things that I try to tell them and other young people and especially young investors is if you decide to go to college, that's great. Like there's nothing wrong with having a great degree, but get a degree in something that's going to help you when you decide that you want to be an entrepreneur, because most people at some point want to build wealth. Most people want to have more and they don't know how to get there. So if you use college to get out and like you did, you have a college degree, which helped propel you into the corporate world where you started seeing a little bit of entrepreneurial ownership.
Right.
Your college then became important because you learned a lot of stuff in college. And you turned that into using it to be an entrepreneur. So I always, like my one daughter, she wanted to be a vet for a long time. She goes, well, I got to go to college for this. I said, I don't want you to be a vet. I want you to own your own practice. Right. Like, and I think that's what people have to do, right? Like, don't go to college to be something. Go to college to own something. And what I mean by that with them often is like, it's cool to get a degree. It's cool to go into a certain field, but can you own your own business in that field and have everybody else work for you under that, right? Because you can do both at the same time.
For sure. Yeah.
So when you're working, you're climbing the corporate ladder, at what point was it where you're like, I don't know, man, like I just want to be on my own? Like what, was there a trigger moment?
Yeah. I mean, that was part of it. Honestly, the other part was family oriented. So I really was feeling like I love to work. So I don't have a problem with the hours, but this was pre-COVID, but it was like, you got to be in the office. You got to be in the office. You got to be in the office. And it felt like if I wanted to grow, if I wanted upside, that just meant more time in the office, more time away from family. So it felt like, man, I want to work hard. I want to grow. I want to have more. I want to, achieve and pursue something. And that goes back to like that drive that I had as a football player. And I was kind of replacing it now with work. And I feel like I still do that today. But it felt like, man, one, that's not going to pay off. Like you said, like it's going to pay off for somebody else a lot more than it's going to pay off for me. But two, like I can't control it. I mean, I was getting up at 4 or 4:30 in the morning to try to get more work done so that I could get the work done while my kids were asleep, so that I could work really hard, but not miss more time with the kids. But like I just felt like for my employers, like, well, that's great, keep doing that, but like, yeah, you still need to be here till 6, and maybe it's going to turn into 7 if you get this promotion. And it's like, man, I don't want to do that. I want to work hard, but I want it to be on my time a little bit better. If I want to be done at 5 so I can eat dinner with my family, but then maybe I work a little bit in the evening when the kids are back in bed, I want to be able to do that. So that's where it was like this, can I have both? Can I work really hard and achieve a lot, but also control it so that I can have a really good relationship with my wife, a really good relationship with my kids, be around my kids. I want to have more control. I want to work really hard, but I want it to work for my life, my family, not the other way around, where like my family had to fit into what that employer wanted me to do.
Sure. Now you started investing in real estate before you left physical therapy, right?
Right.
And you were by yourself. You were kind of doing that on your own a little bit. And I remember your first property was a flip, right?
Yep.
How'd that go for you?
Yeah. In some sense it went pretty well.
Hold on. I know that one of your flips didn't go well. Was it your first one or was it?
I mean, the first one, like if my wife was here, she would explain it as, more of a nightmare. We made money on it. So it went well in that sense. But yeah, it was, we would never do it again, right? I think a lot of people say that for their first deal, like, hey, got me started, right? Got me going, learned a lot, would never do it again. It was a train wreck. Nobody else wanted it. Bought an online auction, sight unseen. It was in our town, Lebanon, just north of Cincinnati. But it was really rough. We had to do everything. Basement leaking, go down the basement, no lights on, walk down, all of a sudden in a foot of water. You don't buy a house with a leasing basement. With the wall was cracked, hold on. Everything.
Who doesn't buy a house with leaking
basement?
Well,
I'm talking to the wrong guy.
Okay.
Most people don't. I know you told me, if you fall through the floor, you're in love. Yeah, most people and I wouldn't recommend it to a lot of people. A lot of people don't have the stomach that you do, but maybe they shouldn't. But yeah, it was rough. When I left that corporate job, went back to home health physical therapy, I knew that I wanted to get into real estate. I at least wanted to try it. And you mentioned, sometimes that college education and that job that you get can allow you to become an owner. And that's exactly what home health physical therapy was for me, because it provided a living. It was more than my wife and I and our family needed to live on. So we were able to start building up some savings to be able to invest and go do a flip on our own. So it was a great job for that. And I had flexibility in it. Flipping is not investing. It's real estate, but it's a job. It's transactional. You're still trading time for money. And so I'd been reading tons of books, listening to podcasts about real estate and about passive income and investing and trying to sell my wife on this dream. And we get into this flip, and it's not that. It's just more time. So when I left the corporate job, I took probably about a 30% pay cut to go back to doing home health physical therapy. But I was working way less hours. But then I had to flip on top of the full-time job, and now I'm working the same amount of hours I was at the corporate job. And we made about enough on that flip to replace that 30% pay cut. So it was this perfect picture of this is just a different job. I'm just as busy as I was if I'm going to be flipping. So we only did one flip before we kind of took the next step.
So let's back up 1 second and talk about the wife.
Sure.
All right. And maybe you remember this story that I shared with you, but the first property I bought was a 4-unit apartment building, which went great. Like I got it for $21,000. That was in the Dayton crazy time, right? Yeah. Where we could buy stuff for cheap. And I was on top of the world, and I sound just like what you were doing with Hannah. I was trying to convince my wife that this was a good path. And she was W-2 oriented, nothing about investments, nothing about entrepreneurship. And I'm like, no, real estate's great, blah, blah, blah. And I was regurgitating everything that I had heard, and I thought that it would be successful. But I had that first deal. It was a 4-unit, went really well, and then immediately found a second 6-unit building, and bought that. We forgot to put insurance on it on a Friday night, and Monday morning I'm watching the news with my coffee.
Oh my gosh!
And the thing is on fire. The whole thing burned to the ground. Now we only bought it for $22,000, and we burnt to the ground. So now that was the last, because I had a partner on those first 2 deals, my mentor, and that was the last $10,000 that I had. I didn't have anything else. That was it. I didn't have any savings. I had nothing. So my wife was feeling good about the first deal. The second deal, I got to come to her a couple days later and say, man, I literally just burned up This is $11,000, right? Like
Yeah.
I used my 10,000, then she gave me like 1,000 or something.
This isn't a metaphor. We
Yeah.
actually burned.
Yeah, we really burned the
$10,000.
money. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, here's the news story, like, and it
That's
was
our place.
somebody threw a Molotov cocktail through the window, because the guy we bought it off of was passed away. He was a drug dealer and was rehabbing this building and was killed in one of the units.
Oh my gosh.
So I can only imagine that the family didn't want to see this building anymore. Now that was 2011. Still to this day, I own that green space. And some people like, well, why don't you just get rid of it? Like give it back to the city or do whatever. I'm like, no, because every 6 months when I pay the tax bill, which is like $721 semi-annually, that reminds me not to be an idiot anymore. But I remember talking to my wife and she was like, oh my God, like this is not what you told me it was going to be. Like this is down. So did you go through that with your wife at that moment when your flip was going kind of crazy and sideways?
Yeah. I mean, even while we were doing it, I was ready to get the next one. I mean, but certainly right after, I'm like, look, we made money. Let's do it. Let's roll. This works. And she's like, no. You because, my wife is so much better about, and I have all the same feelings, but I can get caught up and have blinders on like, business and here's what we need to do. And she's like, that didn't improve our lives. Like you said, you told me about like, freedom and control. And she's like, it didn't feel like we were in control, because at the end it was like, we got to have this thing ready for selling season for April, May, right? That's when you want to sell a single family home. And so at the end it was like, we gotta hustle. And so every weekend she's like, it's taking all of our weekends, taking all of our nights. Like, no, that's not, I don't want to do this again. That's not what you explained. So, I had to admit like, yeah, you're absolutely right. That's not what I want either. So, okay. But I know real estate can work. Again, I'm not gonna give up on that.
Right.
But maybe we need to do it a little bit differently. But yeah, I mean, she was absolutely like, we don't want that. We want, if we're gonna do something, it's got to improve our lives. Like that's what we're doing it for. We want to have a better life, and like that kind of made our life worse. At home anyway. Sure, we made some money, but she's not that driven. And again, like I said, my job was good enough. We had enough money. So it had to be something that truly did improve our lives.
So you go back to the drawing board and you come up with, I'm going to invest in multifamily. Yep. And you end up buying, was the school the first thing that you
No, I did a duplex next.
Okay, duplex next.
And then the school, yep.
And he did the school. And I guess we don't have to dig into those. Like you end up exiting those successfully, if I remember you telling me the story. But at the end of the day, when you did the flip, when you did the school, when you did the duplex, at that point, did you feel like an entrepreneur? Like in your mind, were you like, I'm an entrepreneur? Or was it, I'm investing in real estate?
It was definitely more like I'm investing in real estate. It was a long time before. It just felt like I was looking for deals.
So and I guess that's what, I have a lot of younger investors that follow me, a lot of younger people that follow me. And I think that's one of the hardest mind shifts and through life and through business, and especially entrepreneurship. And now like I have several multi-million-dollar companies that are not real estate. And I've seen that every company goes through its life cycles. And that also means that every entrepreneur goes through life cycles, right? And you have a different way to think about things. You have a different way to live life. Like every rung that you kind of go, and some of that's slower for others, some of it's faster for others. But for some, that's one of the hardest things to overcome, is to actually see yourself as an entrepreneur and not just taking on a side hustle. Yeah. So, in your life, in your journey, like where was the moment where you really thought of yourself as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, once we had, so we did that duplex. We got the school, which was a 16 unit. Right after that, we got an 8 unit and a 10 unit. So we had 34 units. I think for me, it had to do with like starting to work with other people and seeing other businesses. We used a third-party property management company for those buildings and kind of seeing that business and the fact that like that business was servicing my properties. It was like, okay, I guess I kind of have a business here. I'm the one, it's my business that this business is making money off of. They're managing my little businesses. So I think with that, I started to get that feeling that like, okay, we're really building something. And because, those were rentals, and that was the transition from, flipping, which is a transaction. And as soon as you sell it, you're done. You have nothing. Versus now, by this time, okay, we have 34 units and we're cash flowing. Like not only are we making them worth more, but every month, property management company brings in all the rent, pays all the expenses, and they send us some money. And like, okay, that feels like a business. So now it's like, okay, we own these little businesses that are making money. And that's when it started to feel real to me. And I started to feel like an entrepreneur, that I'm like, we've got some businesses here that are producing income. We just had like one investor on each of those, just did some joint ventures. And so they're making a little bit of money. And so I think with that, I started to feel like this feels like we've got something going here, that I'm an entrepreneur and I've got this little, I don't know if I'd have called it a business then, but like we've got something going here.
But it was starting to feel that way.
It was starting to feel that way, yeah.
So why, I think the obvious question for a lot of people is you're an athlete, you go into physical therapy, you're in the corporate world, and then you decide that you want more, you want to have your own business. Why was real estate the first thing that you chose? Or was it the first thing that you chose? I don't know that I know the answer to that.
It was the first thing I chose. I'm not sure why. My dad's in construction. So I grew up around construction. In the summers when I was, off of college, I would do construction. So I've been around that a lot. So I think like flipping felt kind of natural to me because I'm not like, I don't do like hard plumbing or hard electric. I mean, I was calling out professionals to do that stuff, but like hung all the drywall, did all the painting, did a bunch of, knocked out all the walls, doing all that stuff, roofed it myself, took off the roof, put on a roof. So I think that's probably what drew me to real estate, was just, I felt like I could work in that business. And I ended up having a buddy at church that I talked to that was in it. And I'm also a math guy. So the more I was learning that like just the investing and the real estate and like, okay, how you have to underwrite, it all just kind of spoke to me and fit, kind of what I like.
Well, that's a much better story than mine. People ask me that and I say, because I wasn't smart enough to do anything else.
Well, and I probably wasn't either, but mine, I really did like.
I knew if I bought a house for $1 and sold it for $2, I might have made something in between, right?
Yeah.
And everything else just kind of trickled behind that. And it's great that you're a math guy because math is my very worst subject and probably one of the things that I'm worst at now. So everybody's like, well, isn't that like a key part of real estate? Like, yeah, but there's a lot of fancy calculators out there, right?
Like, yep. And you can hire for it. You can hire for it.
You absolutely can.
Yeah.
All right. So it sounds like it's like you're starting to get the entrepreneur bug. You're starting to get that like kind of that fuel. Like, yes, I can do more. I can be more. But I'm going to bust the myth right now on this show. And and I know you see them out there, and I know you hung with them, like all these online educational gurus. And some would say, well, Todd, maybe you're that way too. But I think for me, like I always try to be authentic and I always try to be transparent. And I always try to be honest with people, especially those that I'm mentoring. But everybody online wants people to believe that you just get crazy rich off becoming a multifamily investor and you get instant like wealth and things like that's the story they portray. And that's because the society wants to hear that story. They want to see the guy driving the Lambo and saying, yeah, I got here from Section 8 properties or whatever it was. The truth with real estate and multifamily, that there's routes you can go that help you get there quicker, but the traditional route is a very slow burn.
Very slow.
It's a very slow burn, and you have months where a boiler goes out or a roof has to get replaced. And some people are like, well, you got insurance for roofs. Well, once you become a little bit bigger, you got to make some very difficult decisions, right? It's like, I got this insurance policy over here that I have really good rates on, and I have a $12,000 roof that I have to replace. Which one is the more important thing for me to do?
The insurance company might drop you if you put that $12,000.
That's it. And I've been dropped before.
I have too.
During the 2019 tornadoes, when I had 13 buildings hit by a tornado, right? Like it was $1.5 million. They paid me my money.
Yep. But then they're done.
But they're done.
Yeah. And now you're going to get a higher rate.
Now you're going to get a higher rate.
Time. Yeah, absolutely.
So for you decide to go a different path. Like I've always, I started off going at it with myself. I still flip, a dozen, 2 dozen homes a year. I used to do a lot more when I first started. And that was always my money to buy multifamily properties because I didn't have money anywhere else. I didn't know about private money lending. I didn't know about hard money lending when I first started out. So the only thing I knew to do was go flip properties or go wholesale a property to make cash so that I could buy a multifamily property.
It's a great way to do it.
And I've always I've had one partnership in the multifamily world, which we've just kind of started dwindling that all the way down now. But, I'm over 1,000 units and those are my units that I own. I don't have any investors on them. I have some lenders on them, obviously, but it's still a slow burn. And you have to do a lot of it. Like at my scale now, I make good money with those. And I'm also a realtor and I have my own brokerage and we do our own property management and I'm doing third-party management for thousands of other units. So I'm making good money with just the real estate piece, but it's because all these things have come together. But if you're start off like you did with the school and an 8-unit, like you're not getting crazy rich at the beginning. It's very hard to just maintain that cash flow. And you have to make a decision on what you want to do. Do you want to become the real entrepreneur and open up and unleash that kind of momentum, or do you want to keep the slow burn? Either way is fine.
Yep.
But that was kind of the moment when I met you, when you were trying to make that decision. And I think you already made the decision, but you were trying to figure out how to do it.
Yes.
And I remember when we first met, I did your podcast and things like that. I know you were talking to realtors, you were looking at a bunch of properties, and you had decided at that point to go into syndication, real estate syndication, which is super cool. Like, and I love the syndication model. I don't do it just because I don't want to answer to investors, right?
Yeah.
I would do it, but I don't need to right now.
No, you don't. No.
But you decided like there's a quicker way to kind of get there with wealth and cash flow. And if you're going to do that, you have to be able to do it on a bigger scale. And you have to do it as an entrepreneur. And at that point, you were looking for some properties. You hadn't found a property yet that kind of hit all the marks that you needed to do a successful syndication, right?
Yeah.
And that's when we hooked up, and we I ended up bringing a C-class property to you that I knew it wasn't the exact property that you wanted, but I also knew the numbers were decent enough on it that you could have a successful deal. And my hope at that time, which I didn't display to you, my hope at that time was, I hope this is kind of like the crack in the dam that allows Lee to really just go buck wild and go crazy.
It was.
But there's a lot of people that are super confused by real estate syndication. So if you could bottle it up to a 16-year-old that's listening to this episode right now, like, what is real estate syndication?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. I'd love to get back to the. You made a great point about that slow burn and how it takes a long time. And I think that's so important. I hope you keep busting that myth, because it's a long game, and it's going to feel worse for a while. And you could probably look back and go, man, if I'd have stayed with the W-2, I'd probably be a little bit ahead of where I am now. And I think that's true. But the upside, it's a totally different thing. So yeah, I'd love to talk more about that. But yeah, a syndication, essentially, Todd, like, we talked about those few small deals. On some of those, we needed $100,000 to close. You can go find one or two people and bring them in for $100,000.
Hold on, let's stop real quick.
Yeah.
I say that so often to people, right? Like somebody like, well, how do you find the money for the deal? I'm like, look, find the deal. And if it's a great deal, you can usually find the money, right? Like there's people in your life that have 100K in a retirement account, or 20K or 50K. And it's not hard to get those money. And people look at me like I'm like nuts.
Yeah.
But you really can find that money on the smaller deals. But you decided to go bigger. So go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting you. I just think it's funny that we say the same thing.
It's a good point, because I mean, I had some family and friends and that had that money, and some people don't. I would say, there's real estate groups, and I think that's where you can go sometimes to, like I say, if you like you just said, if you bring a good deal into a real estate group and say, hey, I'm going to do all the work here. I've got a good deal. The numbers look good. Does somebody want to own 50% of this? If you bring the money, you can find that. It might be harder for some than others. I had some family and friends that were able to bring that. But a syndication just says like, okay, now I'm going to go buy a 45 unit is what you brought to us. And now I need $550,000 to close the deal and to put into the property. I don't know a couple people that can bring $550,000. I'm going to need to bring this out to a wider group of people. And that group of people is not going to be active in the deal. So as soon as you have people that are going to bring money for the deal and they're not going to have any active role in it, that's a syndication. So technically, even if one person brought that $550,000, but they're going to have no active role, that technically is a syndication. So that's all it is. It's just, you're going to go raise money from people for a deal. You're going to give them a piece of that deal, but they have no say in it. They have no active role. And that's what I'm looking for. I want people that want to invest their money and let their money work for them, but I don't want them to have any role, because this is my deal. I'm going to run it. We're going to do it. I don't want your input. Like, this is us. This is our business. You're just bringing the money. So that's all a syndication is.
And so from a high level, in kind of how your model is, you're the general partner.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And then the investors that you bring in, they take a limited partner role. That's right. And you kind of set it up that way. But there's also two types of syndication models that you can do. And a lot of people don't understand that, right? Like you're restricted with how you can raise money. It's not like you can just go out and say, hey man, anybody wants to give me $100, give me $100, right?
Yeah.
And there's really two main ways to do a syndication. And will you kind of explain that for people on what the two sets are, that how you can raise money and what it allows you to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And the general partner and limited partner is a good piece too, because a limited partner means their risk is limited to the amount they invest. So if somebody invests $50,000 with us, they could lose that $50,000, but that's it. But for us, and I mean, I know you take this role all the time, we sign on the debt. They can come after our house, so we're general partners. We have general liability. They can come after us, our investors, not so much. But there's two types of syndications. One, the one that we do, we can accept accredited investors, which is just kind of wealthy people. Somebody has a net worth of $1 million, or they make 200 grand a year as an individual, or 300 grand as a couple. We can take as many of them as we want, and you can take those investors in any syndication. But in the 506B syndications that we do, we can also take non-accredited investors, which means people that don't have that net worth or that income. We can let them invest in our deals. But because we do that, we cannot advertise our deals. So I couldn't come on this podcast and tell, the general audience, people that I don't know, about a deal that we've got and ask them if they want to invest. I've got to have a relationship with them first.
Yeah.
So
and it
that's
has to be a
syndication.
documented relationship, right?
Yeah.
Like it could be, man, we met on some forum and we talked and got to go each other. We went and had coffee, or we talked to each other. So it's not like, you don't have like a long relationship, like you don't have to be married or something, just some type of relationship that you can prove that you've had with this person.
Yep. But the other type of syndication, you can only take accredited investors, but I can advertise them. But the idea behind that is like the government's trying to protect not wealthy people, I guess. So it's like, hey, if you want to blast it out and you're only going to bring wealthy people in and they lose their money, that's fine.
Right.
But if it's not wealthy people, you better have a relationship with them to get them interested in investing with you if you're going to lose their money.
Yeah. So what was when you decided you were going to do syndication? Syndication is like very foreign for a lot of people. And it was for me for years. Like it was probably, I don't know, it had to be like 7-8 months before I'd met you, where I actually went to a real estate syndication conference, the best ever conference with Joe Fairless.
Okay.
He was on your podcast.
Yeah.
Great guy.
Oh yeah.
And he puts on the best ever real estate conference. And that year was in Colorado. And I met Whitney Sewell, who we both been on his podcast. Great. He's a great syndication guy.
Yes, he is.
And that was the first time I really started understanding about syndication. And here's the crazy thing. When I went out there, I was in Colorado, and we were up in Aspen and in other parts. My wife went out with me. We had a fantastic time. And I met all kinds of people out there. And I started hearing about syndication. I'm like, hold on, like I don't got to bring my own money to the table. Like I can just go ask people for money. I'm like, this is great. Like this is crazy. And I never did syndication. But what it did teach me was that's when I kind of decided, right? Which after that was like, how do I start networking? And that's when your first podcast that I was on came on.
Yeah.
And that's what that conference taught me, was like networking piece of it. I never used the syndication, but I certainly understood it at that point. So what was the main decision? And I think that's really important for people to understand, is like, do you decide to invest with yourself and just stay small, or do you do syndication? Like, what was the main reason you chose a syndication route for your entrepreneurial journey in real estate?
Yeah, I think the way I look at it, and I'd be interested in your perspective, Todd, because I feel like maybe you would disagree with this because your journey maybe has not fit into this. But I felt like when I had 34 units, it was just doing it by myself. I had a couple investors, but it was really a solopreneur at that point. I felt like, and I knew other guys that were. You weren't one of them at the time, but other guys that might have had a 100-unit portfolio or 200-unit portfolio, and I'd kind of shadow these guys, job shadow them, drive around them, and they're running around with 100 keys in their truck, and they're kind of solopreneur, and they manage their own stuff, and I started to think like, okay, I could keep going down this route of like buying some small multifamilies, doing it myself, just bringing an investor here and there, kind of managing myself, which I wasn't managing myself at the time, but I could do that, and like. I could own 200 units and make a really good living. You can do that. That's a great path. I have nothing wrong with that path. And just kind of be a solopreneur, do it yourself. Maybe you have a couple employees, but you're kind of just real small. And you can make 200, 300, 400 grand a year. Like as you start paying these things down, you can do incredibly well. Or you can go much bigger and build a business, like kind of a big business, and kind of the sky's the limit. You could own 20,000 units. And I just felt like, for whatever reason, again, I don't know that there's one better path, but I just felt like I want to go the business route. I want to buy as many units as I possibly can, build a big business, bring in a ton of investors. Yeah, like we're going to end up having a ton of investors, and we're going to have to maybe, have somebody that talks to them so I don't have to talk to every single one of them all the time. And like, but that's what a business is. And it's unlimited, and it can never stop. And so that's what led me in that direction. That's what I saw in that direction, was like, I want to keep going forever. I just want to keep building and do bigger deals. And it felt like syndication is the way to do that.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with your thoughts on it. I think I have a different opinion that I'll explain in a second, but I think there's some major things that people have to decide when they decide what route they're going to go in real estate. And for you, you had the ability to kind of go the route that I was going, which was just do everything myself and do all that, right? And like,
Yep.
and it took me a while to get to, over 1,000 units, right? But what I'll say is the money that I make on 1,000 units compared to a syndicator that has 1,000 units, hands down, I'll blow them away.
100%.
But either route that you choose, you have to do it the right way.
Yeah.
And if you choose to go by yourself, in what I call a stack business, okay? And when I talk about having a stack business, it's bringing everything in. So for me, I looked very early on at what cost me the most money. What was the most expenses? So if it was plumbing, I brought in a plumber that could do other things.
Yep.
If it was management, which management would, I never had third-party management, but I managed everything myself.
Yep.
If it was apartment turns, instead of hiring a contractor, I brought in teams and found a way to keep them busy all the time on all kinds of stuff, which is why I kept flipping, because eventually you don't have enough apartment turns to keep them busy, but I knew I wanted those crews to be loyal to me.
Yeah.
So I would go buy a flip that I would only make 10, 15K on because I wanted to keep them busy.
Yeah.
And that's one part of the stack business. But the other part of it is that I chose a creative financing route when I did it because I didn't have money. So I was huge on land contracts and owner finance deals, and not just owner finance deals and land contracts, but really, really good terms, right? So the first 50 unit complex that I bought, I brought $0 a table.
Wow.
It was an owner finance deal that was amortized over 30 years. And I used all rent to just pay my mortgage back. So, dude, I was banging 20K a month free and clear. And that was one of the first big apartment units that I had done, right?
Yeah.
And if you go the route where you want to do everything on your own, but you hire a management company, you're hiring contractors for everything, you got a heavy mortgage on your property that doesn't have beneficial terms to you, you're right. Absolutely, you're right. You're not going to make a great amount of money.
Yeah.
And syndication would be such a positive over top of that, where you can build a lot more units, right? Now, I also think the stack business works in syndication, and you just got to this here recently, right? Like you saw where some of your big expenses were and your frustrations, which was property management. So you decided to bring property management in-house, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you, good decision, bad decision? Like, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I feel really good about it. I think it was a very good decision. I resisted it for a long time because I think ultimately you're right about stacking the businesses. I resisted that for a long time because I kept saying, I don't want that business. The business that I am building, that I want to build, is an investment company, is a private equity company that buys properties. I don't want to build a property management company, but that business stacks so well because not only is it expensive, so not only is it making my syndication company, my private equity company, not as profitable, but they're also not doing a good job. Like they're not focused on my properties. Right. So it was twofold. It was an expense, and they weren't doing a good enough job. So it's like, this is expensive and it's not good, right? It's the opposite of what's Walmart or Kmart, lower prices and better value, which, I don't know if it exists, but it's the opposite of that. So yeah, ultimately it was like, and also just in building a business, that there's a lot of synergies there that, like, man, some of the people I'd like to hire for my private equity business, for the syndication business, that kind of overlaps with some of the hires we could make if we brought all our property management and decision just company wise, on top of, man, we're going to do a better job. It's not the company that I wanted to build. So the first year, the first 6 months for sure of being all in on that wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't exciting.
Now, you're ready for the real answer why you started a property management company?
Yeah.
Because you are an entrepreneur.
Yeah. That's
and
good, yeah.
if you're just a real estate investor or you're just a side hustle person, you don't think about starting other businesses that weren't in your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But if you have an entrepreneurial mind and you have an entrepreneurial spirit and you run into stresses and frustrations in your business or things that are dragging a business down, like real estate investing, you find a creative solution to fix it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's, I'm just going to start my own company. And we do mental health group homes now. We do developmental disabilities. We're an agency service provider, which that's like one of the crazy parts of my story is I do very, very well in real estate. I've been very blessed, but that's not even our most profitable business. Our most profitable business is the one that we started 3 years ago, which is for providing services to developmental disabilities. Yeah, now, I found that through real estate on a 10-unit building I was buying. And when you learn how to stack your businesses that support your mission and your goal, man, your wealth just starts driving, right? Yeah. But if that property management business allows you to bring in an extra staff member that you might have not been able to have before because you're saving that 10% on management fees or you're saving, man, and God help some folks that have property management groups out there that hire contractors for every bit of work they do, because they will gouge you on
It's
on
wild.
markups.
Yeah.
Now, I don't, and that's the thing. Like, I'm a third party property manager, but I always say I'm a different property manager. 'Cause, man, I lose money on my property management half the time, because we just don't gouge our owners, because we don't have to. That's like my 7th business. I don't have to have it be profitable.
Sure.
But property managers that are third party, if you think of like a 4-unit apartment building that's bringing in $3,000 in rent a month, and they're charging 10%, that's $300 a month. How many properties do they have to really make some decent money?
What we try to do as much as we can is what you just said, Todd. Like, we own mostly bigger properties that are close to 100 units. And so we'll have a full-time maintenance guy. And the more we can use him, it's just going to save us so much.
Man, I'm so happy that you made the decision to take property management in-house. And as you get larger, you're going to be able to continue to cut that down. You won't have to hire a flooring guy.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
You'll have, I got one guy that just does floors for me. Like, he works full-time for me.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
and he can't even keep up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's always new floors.
But the amount of money you're going to save by having that in-house is great. And I think by you having that entrepreneurial spirit that says, man, I'm going to control everything. You don't have to manage everything. You don't have to be in control of everything. But I talk about it all the time, being the visionary of your companies.
Yeah.
And then hiring the right people that you watch for a while and give them enough rope to either be successful or unsuccessful. But being the visionary of your companies allows you to be so much more successful. And your benefit is that you're also local, right?
Yeah.
So you're in between Dayton and Cincinnati. I mean, you could buy in Columbus, you could buy in Cincinnati, you could buy in Dayton, you could buy in Northern Kentucky, which you've bought in some of those areas.
Yep.
That gives you a big benefit. But if you're a syndicator or an investor that is not local and you can't reach out and hug your property anytime that you want to, you got to think really, really hard about how you drive those expenses down.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're going to still be dealing with the property management. But I think that's really the difference, is if you can stack your businesses, your wealth level and your life can absolutely change. But you got to think about, you can't just be a syndicator.
No.
You got to be an entrepreneur and think about, how do I really build an incredible business?
Yeah.
And not be willing or not be afraid to take opportunities as they come up, like property management. I remember saying it to you. I'm like, you're local. Why don't you just do your own stuff?
Yeah.
You're like, I don't want that. I don't want any part of that. I just want to be a real estate investor.
Yep.
So then when you decided to take it in-house, I kind of chuckled on the inside of me when we talked. And
that's fair.
But I knew it was the best thing for you. And hopefully that's turned out to be true for you, is that you're happy that you did that.
What a lot of guys have done is they're still, even though they're buying apartment buildings, they're still where I was. And not that I'm never here, but like, they still just think of it as an investor. And it's like, I'm going to buy this 100-unit apartment building. And, from you and I, like, I'm going to buy this apartment building in St. Louis. And I ran the numbers on it, and it's good. And I'll find a good property management company there. There's got to be a good property management company in St. Louis. And so I'll do this. And it's just a numbers game. It's just an investment to them. And look, that's part of it. But it's a business. And it's hard. It's easy from 2020. I mean, even going back a little bit before that. But the run-up, I mean, in real estate, all the way really up to 2022, when the Fed started raising rates, it was kind of easy. Like, you kind of could do that, but that's not normal. Normally, you've got to think of it like an entrepreneur, like a business owner, and that's your business. And it's hard. You've got to try hard to drive revenue. You've got to try really hard to decrease expenses. You got to think about it like that. Like, gosh, how can I save? I mean, forget $2,500 per turn, but like, how can I save $500 per turn?
Right.
It makes a big difference, not just in value, but in your cash flow. And these guys are getting into it now where it's like, man, I thought it was just like buy for $1, sell for $2, but buy for $5 million, own it for a few years and I'll sell it for $6 million. Well, why are you going to sell it for $6 million? Is it worth more? Like, is the NOI, is your cash flow more? Did you drive down expenses? It's really hard to do. And so I think there's a lot of value. And I started out small too, and kind of followed in your footsteps a little bit, but you did it even more so, where like, you learned that I've really got to run this property well. I've got to be hands-on. I've got to make the changes that are going to make it more profitable, not just like I'm going to buy something, finance it, raise some money, and then it's just going to go up. It doesn't work like that, not normally. And so a lot of guys are getting in trouble, and they're finding out, like, I've got to be an entrepreneur. I've got to be a business owner of this business that is a property. And I've got to try really hard, work really hard, have good systems to drive down expenses to make this property cash flow and then be worth more. It's difficult. You got to think of it like that.
Well, it's very tough. And I think, if I was to give a warning or disclaimer to my audience that listens to this, because real estate syndication it's very tricky. And if I would, and I warn people all the time that talk to me about real estate syndication. It's very easy to get tied up with the wrong syndicators. And we've seen them, and you've seen them. Like, there's dudes that I've hung out with at very powerful masterminds that are now sitting in federal prison.
Yeah.
Because they've stolen investors' money
properties.
and they're not doing things the right way. And, I see I've bought so many properties cheap. Like, I just bought a 10-unit building for $260,000 and only needed $50,000 in renovation. Like, that's a great deal.
Yeah.
But
it's ridiculous.
But I bought the property because it was a bad syndicator that was doing a fund, not a specific deal, not a specific property, but yet a fund. And I always tell people, be careful of the funds. Make sure you know what their exact goal is for the fund and all of your stuff. But you have to do a lot of due diligence on syndicators.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to choose a syndicator, because this is where kind of passive income comes in. People talk about passive income. If you are the one that's the general partner, if you're the one that's going out and finding the real estate and buying it's never passive.
Never.
It is active income, and you have to see it as that. People that are in, attorneys and psychologists and therapists that are making really good money, right? Like, they're making $300,000-$400,000 a year, but at the end of the year, they get that tax bill. So those are the people oftentimes that I talk to, and they're like, well, how do I shield myself from all these taxes? If you can find a great syndicator like Lee Yoder and somebody that has a proven track record and is going to do the right things, you can dump your money there. You can get so many tax benefits, right? Because when you're in a real estate syndication as a limited partner, you still get the tax benefits of depreciation and, bonus depreciation and if they have loss, like, you get all those tax benefits. So I always caution people, do your due diligence. Make sure you really, really research.
Oh my gosh, for sure.
The syndicators that are out there. And I've never hesitated. Like, people that talk to me about that, like, you're a dude that I would recommend to anybody that does syndication, because I don't do syndication. And I would trust my mom investing in a syndication deal with you. Like, now she's in a nursing home and she only made it to 8th grade, so she doesn't have any money. But if she did, I would say go hook up with my dude Lee Yoder. He's a great syndicator. But that's a very, very stark warning to people that make sure you do that, right?
Yes.
So what would your suggestion be, kind of like in a nutshell, if somebody's looking at placing money, let's say doctor, lawyer, attorney, therapist that's out there that's making really good money and needs to kind of get some of the tax shelters and get some of the benefits and not, stop paying all these big tax bills, and they start looking at real estate syndication, in a nutshell, what would you tell them to do to choose the right syndication or the right fund? Like, what would your advice to them be?
My advice would be referrals. I mean, and that's a lot of spaces. That's probably the right answer. But if someone's asking me, hey, I want to know about your track record.
The biggest red flag that I tell everybody, like, if you're deciding to run for the hills away from a syndicator or to invest with them, this is the one thing that I tell everybody. If they can't tell you anything negative about themselves or a deal that they've done as a syndicator, get in your car, drive away, hang up the phone, like, get off the internet with them, like, run away, because things don't always go great.
That's right.
And people have to understand that.
Yeah.
It's no different than investing in the stock market.
Yeah.
Okay. Stocks are going to be up, they're going to be down. But here's what's really, really good that we know. Like, the stock market, even in the worst recession, is like 7-year to recover, right?
Yep.
Like, that's what they say. And in real estate, and especially in syndications or properties, whatever they're doing, you might have a property that dives off, right? Like, you might have a huge CapEx that you're like, man, we just got to do it. Or you might have a fire in a unit or something that, like, takes you down for a while. But as long as you do it right and you're with the right operator and they're honest about that, you'll recover from that and you'll do well on it and you'll do fine on it.
Yep.
So I want to, if I was the one, I don't invest in syndications, but if I was, I want a syndicator that's willing to be very honest with me about the negatives that they've had on properties and talk to me about how they've communicated, like you said, with their clients. And if they can't, they either haven't done enough deals, so you shouldn't be with them anyway, or they're just a liar and you should run from them anyway. So
that's exactly right.
So those are good tips, man, for people that want to get into this, because I do think real estate syndication is powerful. I think it's a powerful tool for people to use that are looking, that don't have the time to actively invest in real estate, but they want to invest. And there's so many things that you can do in the real estate space. And I love the syndication model. I've been thinking to myself, like, man, I should just do one just to, like, do it.
Yeah. I mean, it allows a lot of people to get in. That's what was kind of cool about it. My first investor was my in-laws, and we did really well on that property. And it was just really cool because my wife and I did really well on it. That was the 16 unit, the school.
Well, you have to do well because Thanksgiving dinner would be very difficult if
there
you
was
lose
a lot
your
of pressure there.
you lose your father-in-law's money. Like, you know, it's one thing you got his daughter pregnant.
Oh my gosh. when we did well, yeah, the next Thanksgiving was great, you know, but it was cool to see them profit from it. And so there was a little me that was like, I want to do this for more people. I want to bring more and more people. And it's kind of like you're coaching, you know, you're going out there and like, man, you know what entrepreneurship has done for me, and you didn't know about it. You know, your parents didn't tell you about it because they didn't know about it. And I would say the same thing. You know, my parents didn't teach me about it because no one taught them about it. And so now you're doing that because you say, gosh, I've benefited so much from this. I want more people to know about it. It's kind of with the syndication. It's like, I want to go buy these big properties, and it's cool that like I can bring in 30 other people, and I think I'm going to make a lot of money off of it, but so are those 30 people.
Threefold Real Estate, which is your company.
Yeah.
Where do they go?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. That's probably my favorite social media.
That's like, isn't that like the old man social media?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know. So that's where I'm at mostly. I'm on Facebook too, but our website is threefoldrei.com. So we got a lot of stuff at the website. You could jump on there too.
So what are you guys doing now? You've had a couple successful exits. You've been buying a lot more properties, man. And I just want you to know that even if we don't talk on the phone, even if I don't text or you don't text me or we go months, I'm a fan and I support
right
you.
Back at you.
And I'm rooting for you to be successful, man.
Yeah.
Like
you've been a big part of it.
I love it. But are you guys working on anything currently right now?
Yeah, we've got a couple. Buying a couple, trying to sell one. So yeah, just deals going on. We're trying to do more of the same. Scale. Scale helps. You know, you've seen this, Todd. When there's something like owning more property, like you said, you can hire some more people. Now you can start doing a better job, and you own enough units. Now you can kind of hire some of your own crews and make it even cheaper. So now all your properties are going to be more profitable. So we're just trying to do more of the same, really. Enjoy buying, around 100 units, put a maintenance guy on, a property manager on, and try to do more of our own. And yeah, now when I'm underwriting, which means you're just kind of deciding, what I can pay for a property and how profitable it's going to be. Now I'm underwriting for us managing the property, and that's helping us. So yeah, just trying to do more of the same, bring in more investors, buy more property, manage them ourselves, make them worth more, do more of that, grow the business, bring in more investors.
So how stressful is it when you're trying to raise a few $1 million for a deal?
It's pretty stressful. It's stressful because we don't do the fund. So we're raising for a specific deal, and you can't do that until you have the deal.
You got to be under contract.
Yeah, you got to be under contract. And then I really don't try too hard until we've gone out and done the inspection and looked at all the units and had a professional inspector come. And then that's when I know, okay, for sure we're going to buy the property. Yeah. But then it's like, I'm going to all my, potential investors like, all right, it's time. Need your money,
right.
In the next few weeks, it's got to go from your account to our account. And sometimes that's hard getting people to actually make that. Yeah. And so to raise a few million, you've really got to do a lot on the front end to feel, we have an email list of over 500 people, and, we only need like 30, 35 of them to invest, but it takes a lot to get 30 or 35 of them to actually invest.
It's like the old sports charities, right? Like when my kids would come home with a school fundraiser or, like they're selling raffle tickets. Like people would be like, oh, I'll take 5 of them. I'll take 10 of them. And it sounded great. Yep. And then I'm like, hey man, I need that $20 and you couldn't get it.
Yep.
So I just started, and this is kind of like my real estate journey too. I just started buying all the raffle tickets, and like I've always kept that philosophy because I hate asking people for money.
Yeah.
I do use private money. Like I have, some people that I'm super close with, and I'm like, hey man, I got this deal going on. For example, I just closed 4 properties, a 6-unit and 3 houses for our developmental disability services, right? Mm. And it was like 800-some-thousand or whatever, and I took that down. But I'd also been waiting on this nursing home up in Springfield for 8 months. It had to get released on a short sale by HUD. So the week that I was supposed to close on those 4 units, the 4 different properties, the realtor on the nursing home called and said, hey, HUD just approved it. We have 11 days to close for their approval.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh shit, like what am I going to do, right? So you either find a way to stall it because just because you're wealthy and you got a lot of money, that doesn't mean that you have all this liquid money sitting there, right? Like you have it in different accounts and you're like, man, this account's like down in the stock market. Like I don't want to pull from that. That'd be stupid. Like I'd be losing my money twice. So I do use private money, and even people beg me sometimes like, hey man, let me get in with you.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, I don't want your money.
Yeah.
Because I'm so afraid I'm going to lose it.
Yeah.
But I do use some people that I'm close to for some private money deals, or I'll do like flips. I'll let a friend come in with me and I'll split it. Like, not that I have to all the time, But what you said earlier, like, it's really cool seeing somebody or, whether it's in church or whether it's a friend or whether it's a family member, it's really cool to see them be able to make profit at the same time you do.
Yeah.
And
fun.
And man, especially when they've never done it before.
Yeah.
Like, you're teaching them about entrepreneurship. You're teaching them about business. You're teaching them about like the evolution of money. And I think that's the really cool part. And I think with real estate syndication, that's kind of like the unique part about real estate syndication is that there's people that have probably come into your syndication and invested money with you. They might not even ever thought about investing money,
That's
or
right, yeah.
they didn't really know how it worked. And like,
Yeah.
you're teaching them a whole thing. So like, you're teaching them a business side of things that they might not have never
That's
gotten
right.
either.
No,
So
that's good.
You're
Yeah.
doing more than just taking people's money.
Yeah.
I know that
so.
your goal is to
I
take the
hope
money,
so.
but
Yeah,
you're doing more than that.
Yeah, I hope so. No, it is. It's been a cool journey that way.
All right, man. So I appreciate you coming in today. I think
Yeah,
we've
been
had a
fun.
lot. I guess the last question I would ask you is this. After the first flip, your wife's like, I don't know if you're, being real with me about this real estate thing. How's she feeling now, man, about the real estate?
She's anxious for that next phase, but she would still say this is the life that she wants, that we get to kind of, be integrated, do our own thing, and have a lot of control.
Well, man, you're going to be there before you know it. You got a grind and a passion that you can't teach a lot of people.
Yeah, appreciate that.
It's something that it's either inside of you or it's not.
Yeah,
And sometimes you can kick somebody in the ass and give them a little bit more, but you have it, right? Like you watch all the videos where people are like, you got to wake up at 5 a.m. before everybody else is working and blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't get in until 11 a.m. today. You know what I'm saying? Like, I came in at 11 a.m. today. Lisa woke me up at 6:50 and she said, hey, do you want to take Pax to school? I'm like, it'd be really nice if you took Pax to school. I'm going to sleep in for a little bit. So I don't buy into you have to be up at 5 a.m. or you have to be up at 4 a.m. But when you're awake and when you're working, you have to be so addicted to what your passion is, and you have to be so obsessed to your business that those hours that you spend are more efficient than anything else you do. And if you're like me, like on Friday, like when we're done, it's Friday today, when we get done filming this, like I'm going to Cabela's and I'm going to buy me some new fishing clothes because I'm taking my fishing boat out tomorrow. I'm not going to stay at work all day. And that becomes easier the more that you do. But just being able to be very efficient and specific and very intentional with all of your actions when you're in entrepreneurship, like that is so important. And I know you do that because I see all the family time pictures. So keep pushing, dude. You're doing big stuff. And like I said, I see you as one of the guys that's going to be a great syndicator. You have a great track record so far, and things are going to go to the moon for you before you know it. And you've done a hell of a lot more than most people. And it's been in a short time. So I enjoy watching your journey. So
thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming in today, Lee, man. I appreciate
thanks
it.
for having me. It's been fun.
Hold up, why do they doubt the kid? I'm about to prove them all wrong again. I got a low tolerance, cause they don't even know what the problem is. It's me.